Long and colleagues for having me here. My name is Aniket, and I'm an anthropologist of science and technology. Specifically, I study the controversies over GM crops in India and more broadly across the world. And I'm interested in GM crops as both as political and cultural objects, in addition to, of course, technological objects. In my research, I find that biotechnologists quite often believe that they are representing facts and the truth, while critics and skeptics of GM crops are indulging in political rhetoric, innuendos, campaigns, etc. So this is a 12-minute talk, which is the academic equivalent of a Twitter post. So I will have to be very broad brush in my presentations. Apologize for that. But nevertheless, I don't think it's a coincidence that in common parlance, the word activism is usually associated with groups opposing GM crops, while those advocating for GM crops claim the ostensibly purified mantle of objective science. I think this view is mistaken. Truths and political slogans don't neatly fall on opposite sides of an imaginary line dividing science with activism. There are scientists who make reasonable and defensible arguments advocating GM crops. There are scientists who make reasonable and compelling fact-based arguments critical of GM crops. There are activists who do not resort to political innuendos. But today, in the brief time available to me, I would like to focus on another class of actors, scientists who indulge in what can only be called hyperbole and political rabble-rousing. And I'm not referring to marginal scientists, but scientists whose authority is gilded by the Nobel Prize. On June 29, 2016, 107 Nobel laureates issued an impassioned plea to Greenpeace to abandon their campaign against genetically modified organisms, or GMOs in general, and golden rice in particular. And I'm going to focus in this talk on that particular golden rice. Contrary to media reports, Nobel laureates wading into the controversy over GM crops is not particularly novel. Notable scientists have participated on different sides of the GM debates for a long time now. What is remarkable is that this letter, and you can look it up online, it betrays a very poor grasp of the facts surrounding golden rice. Golden rice is an orange-yellow colored rice which has been genetically modified to produce beta-carotene, the precursor of vitamin A. Advocates claim that this is a powerful way of combating vitamin A deficiency, the cause of many diseases, including blindness and deaths among the poor in Africa, South and Southeast Asia. Golden rice was developed in the 90s by Ingo Potricus and Peter Bayer. As of date, the transnational corporation Syngenta holds exclusive rights to it. Moved apparently by humanitarian sentiments, Syngenta decided in 2004 to offer it for free, subject to several conditions, to agricultural research institutions in developing countries through the public-private partnership, the Golden Rice Humanitarian Board. The project of taking golden rice to developing countries is housed within the International Rice Research Institute, or IRI, in the Philippines. The Nobel laureates argue that the reason this innovation has not started saving lives yet is Greenpeace's criminal opposition. This, this conspiratorial narrative glosses over the rather more straightforward explanation, as IRI itself admits on its website, and I encourage all of you to just go to IRI and look at what is the status of golden rice. Golden rice is not ready for farmers across the developing world yet. There are very above-board reasons for this, which have little to do with anti-GM activism. The letter by the laureates noted that golden rice has the potential, this is a quote, has the potential to reduce or eliminate much of the death and disease caused by vitamin A deficiency. I mean, this is a disingenuous statement. It immediately begs the question, well, if there's the potential, then how might one actualize that potential? So it begs the question, under what conditions might that potential be actualized? Simplifying matters somewhat, at least two conditions need to be met for golden rice to work as promised. It should be available for cultivation by farmers in different parts of Asia and Africa. It should be bioavailable. That is, the digestive system should be able to extract the beta-carotene and make it available to the body, improving vitamin A levels. Now, there are question marks on both these counts. The two versions of golden rice developed so far, golden rice 1 and golden rice 2, are both japonica or dryland rices. while peoples in areas with vitamin A deficiency in South and Southeast Asia generally cultivate and consume the submerged indica paddies. Japonica varieties are easier to genetically modify, but they fare poorly in fields in the diverse ecologies of Africa, Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia. And IRI is still in the process of crossing golden rice 2 into indica varieties. The experiments are far from complete. A notice posted on the IRI website in 2014 noted that results of the first round of multi-location trials of golden rice showed that yields of candidate lines were not consistent across locations and seasons, prompting research direction towards assessing other golden rice versions. In other words, IRI was itself not ready with the golden rice when the Nobel laureates issued the letter. In early 2017, IRI posted a statement saying that it has submitted regulatory dossiers in Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, USA, and Canada. Now, except Philippines, none of the above countries are developing countries. There is no application yet in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Thailand, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, or any of the other African rice-growing countries. This is hardly a rice ready for cultivation by farmers. It has not even entered the stage of evaluation for agronomic performance by government regulatory by government regulatory institutions. The question of bioavailability is even more vexed. The body does not necessarily absorb beta-carotene simply because it is produced in golden rice. The Golden Rice Humanitarian Board's website quotes a study published in 2012 in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition for establishing the bioavailability and effectiveness of golden rice. In 2015, the journal retracted this paper, citing ethical concerns. But let us assume that the ethical concerns do not detract from the findings of the article. Nevertheless, let's look at the article in more detail. The study design is quite curious and merits attention. The study saw middle-income, healthy Chinese children consuming a total of 210 grams of pork and other foods over breakfast and lunch, with 40% of the total calorie intake coming from fat. Does this sound like a poor developing country diet to any of us here? Fats help the body absorb beta-carotene, since the latter dissolves easily in fats. Unlike customary practice, the golden rice fed to the children had been stored at minus 70 degrees Celsius after drying for 3 days to avoid any decline in beta-carotene levels with time. The study design basically favored golden rice rather than reflecting the actual lives and habits of poor Asians and Africans, who generally cannot afford fat-rich meals every day. Just to give you a comparison, the average fat content of the fat content of the average Indian diet, that is averaging across class, caste, religion, is less than 10%. So, and if you talk only of poor and malnourished Indians, that figure drops even more. And the test diet was 40% fat calories. So far, there is no answer to the real question, how will golden rice perform as parts of meals that poor people, typically malnourished, actually eat? The Nobel laureates accuse Greenpeace's campaign of raising the regulatory bar for GM crops. The facts above suggest otherwise. Neither Greenpeace nor regulatory hurdles have delayed golden rice's release. In fact, in 2009, the distinguished biotechnologist Dr. Swapan Datta, who was with the Ministry of Agriculture in India and who is a collaborator of Ingo Potricus, said quite categorically that the regulatory system is not the barrier to releasing golden rice in India. The IRI itself, in its update released in 2014, stated, golden rice will only be made available broadly to farmers and consumers if it is successfully developed into rice varieties suitable for Asia, approved by national regulators, and shown to improve vitamin A status in community conditions. So in the interest of time, and I'm concluding, in the interest of time, let us ignore the political aspects of golden rice and GM crops. This letter by 107 persons is signed by physicists, chemists, doctors, a few economists, and one peace laureate. Yet many sciences have something to contribute to the debate over GM crops. And no rice breeder has signed this statement. Agricultural scientists in general are absent in the statements. Ecologists, nutritionists, sociologists, among others, are not represented in this statement, although they have valuable things to contribute to the issue of GM crops and golden rice. Let us also ignore that 107 rich, well-fed persons, majority of whom are white men, have rather arrogantly presumed to tell diverse peoples, cultures, and communities of the world what they ought to be growing and eating. Now, the white men, maybe you can ignore, but anyone who has even a little bit of sympathy for the food sovereignty movement should think about how is it that such a small group is dictating, or rather recommending quite passionately, one type of food for this huge population which resides in the tropics. And of course, golden rice has been put to the regulatory dossiers of 4 developed countries and Philippines. Let us just ask 2 basic questions. Is golden rice ready to be cultivated by farmers? IRRI itself answers no. Does golden rice improve vitamin A levels among people as they actually live and eat? We don't know yet. Yet, the letter says, how many poor people in the world must die before we consider Greenpeace's opposition to golden rice a crime against humanity? It's in bold there. So here we have 107 Nobel laureates arguing that those of us, and I count myself in this, skeptical of golden rice, are in the same league as perpetrators of genocide. One thought activists were supposed to be hysterical. I just leave you with the question, is Greenpeace indulging in crimes against humanity, or are Nobel Prize winners insulting our intelligence?
Thank you. Thank you. We'll do questions for Aniket, but just if Jennifer Blesh could come up and set up her slides, that'd be great. So questions?
Can you personally shed any light on why genes from daffodil were used to make golden rice instead of one of the many food sources of carotenes?
I'm afraid I can't. It's a question best asked to Ingo Potricus. From what I've read, I think it has to do with what was regenerating more efficiently in tissue culture and which genes were more amenable to be moved into rice systems. But it's a question best asked to the Golden Rice Humanitarian Board. Yes.
So my question is, what work has been done in actually assessing what farmers in Africa and Southeast Asia and such would like to grow? What is their opinion of golden rice?
That's an excellent question, and I can answer the question. So these are broad geographies, and one really needs to think of these questions very specifically in ecological and political context. But that said, I would say that the number one anxiety for all farmers is making returns above their costs, right? And being able to, fulfill their many aspirations for a dignified life and social mobility. Now, once you start from that position, the link to one golden rice becomes quite tenuous. So there are many things that need to be done in agriculture and sustainable agriculture in particular, such as making water available, correcting the lopsided structure of subsidies, international trade issues, and so on and so forth. But it's a good question in the sense that the moment one asks that question, one immediately sees the enormous distance between genetic tinkering inside a crop and the issues that farmers face. Yes, Sasha.
Last question.
I can't really speak for Greenpeace. I suspect that, I should add though that I'm neither anti nor pro-GM. This is an unhelpfully abstract peg to, identify one's academic position. But that said, I think Greenpeace would argue that, that if vitamin A deficiency is the problem, many other things need to be addressed, such as why, I mean, even though why is hunger still persistent, even though there are record yields of wheat and rice every year? So there are distributional issues, there are issues of access to nutritious food, and there are many people who can speak more competently about that than me. Now, but coming to your first question, that what can be done? Well, there is another study which was published in 2006 in the same journal, which has not been retracted. The reason I didn't talk about it was because that diet included 15 grams of cashew nuts and whatnot. I mean, the fat content there was 60%. And because that created a ruckus that who eats, after all, 60% of their intake in food as fat, that the next study was brought it down to 40%, and that is the study which I mentioned, which is retracted. But presumably, if governments are interested in going the golden rice way, then they need to design studies which see how golden rice, whether or not it is bioavailable in the food that people actually eat, in the conditions in which they will actually access golden rice and cook it, rather than rice stored at minus 70 degrees Celsius, harvested, dried only for 3 days. So these are all empirical questions which can be answered, and they can be answered irrespective of Greenpeace's position.
Thank you.